Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest feature of IndiCast. And today we are trying to take a slight shift from our conventional covering of very hyper specific uh, international relations slash security related issues to take a more of a larger political philosophical view of the things that have been affecting the world order. So we are going to talk about human suffering and the way we might be a little desensitized to it in the digital age. And why we are talking about this is that we've been getting reels of the recent wars that have happened, say in the past 36 months or so, which includes the incessant killing in West Asia. We all know how people in Gaza have suffered. We all saw the footage of the October 7th attacks. In a more recent example, closer to home, we saw some disturbing, distressing footage from Jammu in India during the Operation Sindoor uh, standoff that was going on between India and Pakistan. And we've also seen a lot of race related hate crimes kind of happen all over North America, especially in the US, many targeted at Indians, and all these videos come to up. So I think, is it a good time to start discussing social media content regulation again? We've done this before, and how it's impacting our brains, right? I think we have all had an appetite for suffering being reported around the world. I mean, in 1939, the Nazi Germany was invading Poland, and people were still getting their news reports up until time. They were listening to radios. Their television also had reached its initial phases, but I don't think suffering was being reported so minute to minute and second by second to everybody. So I definitely think a certain kind of numbing will happen over time after we keep absorbing these issues without the power to do anything about it. See, the average person consuming this information is also being sent the message that, listen, there's a huge number of people in the world being killed, and there's nothing you can do about it, and your economic interest and your day to day life shall forever be your priority, right? Jay, what do you think?
I understand what the premise of this conversation is, where we're trying to talk about the impact of such content on our day-to-day existence and how it might cause anxiety, how it might just put us through a lot of mental trauma, because consuming so much violence does affect your day-to-day existence. There are no two ways about it. And given the fact that these days, immediately after a major attack, be it a racially motivated attack or a terrorist attack or any type of crime that's committed, it is immediately on our phones. Either it's on Instagram, or it's on X slash Twitter, or it's on Telegram. And Telegram is one of these applications which is not regulated at all. So, say if something gets reported on Instagram and X, you know for a fact that you will eventually find it on Telegram. Now, because someone
Or
who,
Reddit, I think.
or Reddit as well, and because someone who has always been, and don't judge me for this, but I have always had this appetite of consuming extremely violent content. And this actually happened by accident, because when the internet was very, very new for all of us, um, you ended up pressing links that you shouldn't have. And specifically at that time, say early 2000s, when there was like absolutely no regulation. So my introduction to these things was through that. But even then, I remember in those really, really small Chinese phones, specifically around the people that we were growing up, people had these videos, people had this snuff content, because it was being generated at an industrial scale to send out political messages through the digital mediums, to tell the world that, if our political demands are not met, or if you come to this area, this is what's going to happen to you. It happened in the Brazilian favelas. The Mexican cartels did it, and then of course it was then very willingly accepted by the Islamic terrorists as well.
Yeah, I think I just want to add, I remember in the early 2000s, those old Nokia phones were very prevalent, and
There were
even
Chinese
in their,
copies of those phones as well.
yeah, even in their small screens, you would have people that, at least we were growing up around sometimes show each other the beheading video of
Yes.
Daniel Pearl.
Yes.
So that this is the Daniel Pearl beheading video. I think is probably a shift in how people watched this
Gore content.
gore.
Snuff
I
videos.
don't want to call it content. It's
Hmm.
was
I'm sorry. Yeah.
distressing.
I'm sorry.
These distressing visuals of
Hmm.
violence which were going around the world at a rapid scale. And I remember being 4 or 5 years old and being shaken to my core and thinking, how do you go to sleep after this? And
Yes.
and that was one of those pivoting moments. And I think over time it kind of got normalized that in our teenagers that was the time when you would have ISIS behead a journalist every few days, and all this was in fact posted on the internet. And some of it, some guy in your school who was trying to be edgy would always pull up a video like that
Yes.
eventually. So it was not always was the consumption of this media willful.
Well, absolutely.
And you always knew that bad and terrible things are happening around the world for political reasons, but not always were you being fed this content willfully. And
Absolutely.
in the 70s and 80s, when media wasn't this complex, I don't think that could have damaged you as much as it does today. I think I
Absolutely.
interrupted you when I brought up the Daniel Pearl
The reason
example.
why I'm calling it content is because there are YouTube channels, there are a lot of different pages on the internet who actually consume this type of content and warn people against consuming it, even by accident. So if you go on these pages, you will understand, okay, fine, there are certain videos, there are certain instances or incidents that I need to stay away from. So it is also in a way I don't know, a way of regulating by regulation that is being done by the internet community itself. I'll give you an example. The recent killing of the Dallas motel owner, which was, again, I don't know how that video was just all over the internet, specifically in India. It is one of the most grotesque things I've ever seen, and it's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying, and it was doing rounds on Instagram as recently as day before yesterday. And now that incident, because I unfortunately consumed the whole thing. Unfortunately, I do it with a lot of such videos. It really, really messed up my how should I put this? My internal wiring, and I wasn't able to work properly, and it was something that I was constantly thinking about. But I realized that because it is something that has already happened and it's something that I've already consumed, I am still at a position that I can make a micro change. And the micro change that I made was that wherever that particular video was available, I went and I reported it for, showing extreme types of violence or injury. And fortunately, those videos got taken off from
Yeah,
the social media.
what you're saying is a very
Yeah.
valid point, Jay. I think that's why every time some kind of digital regulation act or digital regulatory framework is brought about, and I think you see a little bit of that in the DPDP of India as well, is that there exists a framework for self-regulation as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, you take a much less problematic in example of, say, sexual content on Netflix
Hmm.
or any other streaming service. The first step to self-regulation is censor warnings and censor board kind of placards and those kind of things, right? So self-regulation is obviously an important tool for putting these things forward, right? I think that if done seriously, it could, for example, stay a guard against rapid consumption of such violent digital media that could then have severe mental health issues, and that could, in my view, lead to a certain degree of numbing towards human
Absolutely.
suffering. And I think that we are all facing a little bit of numbing to overconsumption of media and overconsumption of news, especially violent news, because we haven't even, for example, seen the long-term effects of Instagram reels, especially of a politically charged or politically, violent setup, but we are all consuming it at mass scale for the last 4 or 5 years, right? And you don't even have that much of a long time frame to study the impact of these things on the human brain. Now, I'm not saying that these things aren't useful. We are primarily a social media driven venture, and social media is so useful and so revolutionary in so many things, as is AI, as are these shorts. But I think a time tested self regulatory study and a prudent usage should be something that we should all work upon, and the government won't be able to do this alone. I'll just end this by saying that I was hearing the Pavel Durov and Lex Friedman conversation, where Pavel Durov was saying something to the extent of whenever any government has tried to censor Telegram, the first attempt has always been to highlight really understandable security related concerns. But over time, you do see how every government will somehow be pitched against individual freedom and individual liberties, also, right? So I think I would love, for example, the government to take steps against prevention of gory content to be shared anywhere, because I also think that sharing of gory content is disrespecting the deceased also to a
Absolutely.
bit, because you don't want to see their bodies like that, you don't want to see their loved ones see their bodies like that. And I think as a result, the government could do something there, but I also don't want the government to overreach its expanse on social media organizations, which more often than not most governments do around the world. And that is in principle why Pavel Durov was, for example, arrested in a fairly liberal country like France also, right? So Jay, back to
No, I absolutely agree with you there. And here is a there always a time where you actually become uh, so used to such content just coming onto your feed that you don't actually analyze as to what type of impact it's happened. After a while, you just become numb to it, and it becomes like part of your regular consumption. And after a while, you just view it like at least how I view it is from an educational standpoint. Uh, I know it might sound strange, but I would like to see what happens in a drone attack's aftermath, specifically to a human body. I mean, if don't get me wrong, you should have an idea as to what things what would be the things that would cause you a lot of danger in the future, specifically the way warfare is evolving, and say if someone comes at you with a machete, how you're going to be able to defend yourself. So
this
from
could
that,
be a this could be a good use case for AI
exactly,
actually. You
exactly,
could hypothetically code AI programs to say how violent actions or how bombings or how warfare could impact civil infrastructure, military infrastructure,
exactly,
or even the human body.
yeah,
But you don't necessarily have to see real people be damaged for that, right? And
absolutely.
I think this is a good case for example, generative AI.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure if you could uncensor Sora or something as complex could already do it.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how. Sorry for sounding naive. AI Gen AI tools are not my field of expertise. I don't claim to know a lot about them, but I think this is a
But
overarching. The idea is that there is a case for AI usage here, that you can see the impact of warfare without really kind of watching people die. And sorry, okay. Finish.
I totally agree with that. But unfortunately, I'm in a profession. And right now, because I am mostly looking after a lot of accidental claims, so
Jay
I
is an insurance lawyer, by
yeah,
the way,
so
for
like
those who don't know.
I'm looking after a lot of accidental claims, and those claims are not very pretty to look at. But automatically, because it is your sphere of work, you get so desensitized to it that you know about all types of fractures that can happen to the human bone. You can understand all types of injuries that can happen to your skin. For example, before working at this place, I did not know what degloving was. And
What is it?
degloving is when literally a whole part of your skin comes off
Or like
like
it
a
gets it
glove.
gets peeled
It,
off.
ge- it gets peeled off, and it was something that I had actually seen in a few of these these gory videos, which I consumed without my I consumed it unintentionally.
Right.
And I got to know about degloving after investigating these claims. So again, it is a very very normal term with respect to medical practice
Yeah.
and claims insurance. But for someone who doesn't want to see that, someone who doesn't want to be associated with that, for them it's going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah. I think, for example, let's take a fairly disturbed or okay, uh, an active insurgent area in India. This is a much larger examination of what you're saying. An insurgent area in India, and take the most disturbed localities police station, for example, in Dantewada or
Mhm.
Pulwama, for example.
Yeah,
The SHO of that area probably has such a high appetite for violence and is probably
exactly.
so desensitized to all kind of
That's what I'm talking about.
violence, you know.
Yeah.
So at a much larger level, I think the professions you deal with, or even, you know, army officers who spend time in the valley, or trauma surgeons, or, you know,
Yes,
those kind of medical professionals, they all have to have a high appetite for violence,
absolutely.
right? But my position always is that maybe these videos and this distressing media should not reach people whose professional requirements don't want
Exactly.
them to be exposed to these things. And I think that's where primarily there is a gap still in digital media regulation. And I'm not a big fan of regulation. I think any kind of regulation, bureaucracy, red tape does more harm than good, right? But maybe just putting tools in place. And AI in itself has such a good use case here also, because after all, AI is incredibly smart and effective, and Gen AI, especially in today's days, solving a lot of problems. It can also become an identification tool, and because it's not going to be sad when it sees those videos, but it
But
can become a good
I think
identification
it
warning
has
tool.
already been used as an identification tool for a very long time. It's almost been 6 to 7 years. In fact, Vice had done a whole. They had done a whole documentary on this. I think if we find it, we're going to put the link in our description. And it wasn't exactly a documentary; it was like a sitting down conversation where they had interviewed an anonymous programmer slash analyzer. I don't know what he was or she was, but they were basically describing their experiences as to how they were filtering out all of this content reaching social media. So whatever reaches us is the most filtered version of it. So apparently
Yeah,
there
for
are
sure.
thousands and thousands of videos which are much worse, which are at a much more much more grotesque level. Those are being filtered out, and still few videos manage to creep in here and there. So there definitely is an algorithm which is being used by the by the social media big tech companies. And I think Vice did a great video on that, and that person also talks about the mental health impact it had
It
on him or
must
her.
have. It must have.
It's just like the most
That's a
devastating
crazy
things.
profession to have
Yeah.
also. And
Hmm.
I think that in principle,
Yeah.
there's a lot of public policy interventions you can suggest to correct this, right? But the real gains will happen when you're able to somewhat establish a sanitized
Hmm.
digital media space. And
Hmm.
I think there's such a gap between saying a sanitized digital media space and a regulated one, because if you try to over regulate, you reach the other end of the spectrum where tech company CEOs are being arrested for not moderating their content in a way that a certain government would like them to. Because after all, we would all like to champion a degree of free speech, but you also don't want social media to become this xenophobic, racist, really disrespectful place that it is becoming. And the number of bot accounts, the number of fake accounts that are sparking up are just adding to this sort of wild west kind of setup that is going on a lot of mainstream social media applications also.
Absolutely, bro.
And I'll just finish by saying that at their core, people find this troubling. Like people, because face to face, outside of these applications and in the real world, in the diplomatic circles or in any business or industry, are still by and large respectful. There are broad consensuses that exist about mutual respect, cooperation, and I feel like to some degree social media is eroding, or I don't want to say social media, but the lack or the improper use of some social media tools, because we ourselves are totally reliant on social media. We're doing this on YouTube. So the lack of these institutions in place are eroding a certain degree of mutual respect. I remember when India, Pakistan were doing Operation Sindoor, there were American channels that were making such racist remarks about the subcontinent. I remember also that there were some justifications purely based on racist innuendos about the killing of the motel owner in
Hmm.
Texas also. So there's got to be some kind of checks and balance, right? I think Grok is a phenomenal tool, but I don't think it may be able to catch up to the volume of users who are posting misinformation. But Grok does a excellent job of fact checking information and probably filtering out some really violent content also. So I think it's just putting mechanisms in place so that everything doesn't have to reach a point where it messes your mental wiring. I think that's just what I'm trying to get at, Jay.
No, I totally understand, and I think I am of the opinion that with respect to our conscious existence as the human race, if I may, we have actually become so medieval, even after being in such a modern age, that a lot of things have started resembling medieval societies. Because in those medieval societies, we used to see people quartered and being hanged. We used to see decapitated heads being, presented as trophies. We used to see extreme levels of violence being celebrated by governments. We used to see, absolute annihilation of people being justified. So I am of the opinion that just because I mean, you might not agree with me, but I feel that just because we're seeing it on our phones right now, it doesn't mean that people did not have access to that, and they did
I
not
mean, I
have
mean,
access
sure,
to
sure.
such things. I mean, in medieval societies, you're just like, moving around your fortified towns, and you just see, like, a bunch of heads hanging from the from the city walls. It was a very common sight. Or say in the Armenian genocide, like, you're an Arab, and you're seeing all these Armenians being, like, forced to walk in those desert areas of Diyarbakir, and they're gonna die. You've seen a bunch of kids just die like that, and you're seeing other Turkic or Ottoman appointed soldiers, they take their daughters away or rape them. So, like, just the people and societies have always seen a partition of this country. So, people have always had access to such things and such.
I think perhaps our focus got limited to the digital media
Exactly.
space because I guess it can just amplify those degrees or those instances of violence. Because I
Absolutely.
am in no way arguing that people have become more violent, because
Mhm.
people have been violent since as far as our archaeology can
Mhm.
trace back, right? There are archaeological evidences of skeletons even from the prehistoric ages being broken or shattered or having evidence of some really pointed weapons buried in them. So there was clearly violence and warfare going around. Violence and warfare are probably as old as the human civilization is. I am perhaps arguing that the impact of technology on the brain to numbing the information about violence has
I
done
I
damage to
get
the
it.
human
What
brain.
I'm trying to say is that technology is another form of us, processing a type of information. So I'm just saying, just because the medium has changed, that doesn't mean that people weren't numb to it before. People were probably more numb to such instances, say 100 years ago or 150 years ago. In fact, Simon Sebag Montefiore, in his book about Jerusalem, mentioned this particular incident where he talks about some dignitary visiting Jerusalem, and them they just casually witnessing an Arab guy decapitate another man, and then, like, not doing a very good job, and then just lifting his head up in the busy market. So,
Yeah.
it's just how the world has always been. And right now, just because we have our phones, it's accessible to us almost all the time. So, say if something's happening bad across the street, we still have the opportunity to avoid it. Now, if you're scrolling through it and accidentally you run through something like that, you're like, fuck, sorry, I apologize for that. I don't have control over this. But again, to counter this point, maybe people didn't have the control of their environment
Yeah.
around that time as well.
I think, see, I'm having a good conversation right now, so I think one facet of a good conversation is that, in my view, it always leads to more questions being asked rather than answering them, right?
Absolutely.
I think my premise was always sort of focusing on the digital media regulation side of these things, but there's also a human element to it, or rather the human suffering element to it, which, as Jay said, maybe it was probably more likely in the medieval ages to see acts of violence much closer to home. So maybe
Absolutely.
even without media, people were numb to violence. And I guess warfare was also so much more close quarter, face to face. I suppose violence as an appetite was
Promoted.
violence had people had more appetite for violence, is what I'm trying to get at, right? So there's no right answers to this. I do think that a content moderation strategy that is led by social media companies will be better in making sure that these videos and these distressing visuals don't really erode our public trust, because I think we anyway live in very low trust societies these days.
Absolutely.
And this erosion of safety that happens with snuff videos and killing videos, even the assassination for Charlie Kirk, we all saw visuals of it.
And
I
people were
think,
celebrating that as well. Like,
yeah,
just.
yeah. I mean, I'm not getting into the
Yeah.
politics of that
Of course, of
debate,
course.
but the low trust, high risk society kind of setup is coming up, and I think that's something that can be moderated or anchored in some stability by social media companies themselves. And I think that's where I'm going to end my
Yes, I'm
talk
also
today.
going to end my thoughts there. It was a very difficult conversation for the two of us to have, and you could probably see it by the amount of times I almost choked by narrating certain instances, because I think this is something that has been sitting with us for the past 3 years, and the amount of consumption. I think this is more of a Jay problem than a Raj problem, because. Uh, I am very, very active on a bunch of Telegram groups which are quite vigorously and quite fastidiously covering the conflict. And unfortunately, I come across a lot of videos that I should have moderated by myself,
Yeah, I
which
think
I
the
didn't.
the way I think I look at social media or any kind of digital media is that I don't really look at it till I have to, and I am very
Exactly.
active on Instagram pages. But what I've done to my algorithm is that it's a lot of just some memes, some news articles,
A lot of brain rot.
some funny memes, some golf, some stuff like that. So it's not necessarily
I think a
problematic
lot of
stuff.
times what I did was, when I was just too overwhelmed and too disturbed to even talk about the type of brutality that I had seen, I would just, like, distract myself by, like, going back to football and
Yeah.
watching Chelsea win. So I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a very healthy way of dealing with
No, but
things,
it's
but
better than watching
yes,
what you were watching. You know what I'm
absolutely.
saying? And I
Yeah,
think this is pivoting us to maybe what can be our next conversation is that we should probably do a feature on the intersection of international political violence and instances of political violence and the impact on mental health. Right now
absolutely.
we're just talking about desensitization,
Yeah,
but what is it doing to people's anxiety disorders? What is it doing to people's panic disorders? Are people being more depressed because, even for example, youth unemployment is higher, and people are being witness to a lot of these acts that could be disturbing to so many people, right? So there's an element of that needs to be talked about. I'm not saying we can fix it, but I think a conversation could just maybe lead to more questions and more discussions. So I think we could end on that note
yeah,
today.
we can end on
All
that.
right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you for
much.
joining us. Please give us
Please like,
respectful
subscribe.
feedback. I get a lot of criticism for our videos also, and I welcome it as long as you engage with it and tell us in a healthy way what we can change, what kind of mm, changes we should make to the way we deliver content, and we are always welcome to respectful criticism. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.